An Arab millionaire marries an overweight woman on a bet and is shocked by what unfolds. She, with a personality as striking as her secret, forces him to confront his own values. The Dubai skyline glittered like a constellation of man-made stars, a testament to human ambition and wealth. Amidst this opulent backdrop, Khalid al-Rashid stood on the balcony of his penthouse, a glass of aged whiskey in his hand. Surveying the city he considered his personal playground. At 35, Khalid was the embodiment of success, dashingly handsome, obscenely wealthy, and unapologetically arrogant. The party behind him was in full swing, the cream of Dubai's elite mingling in a haze of expensive perfumes and even more expensive champagne. It was a typical night for Khalid, surrounded by beautiful women and powerful men, all vying for his attention. But tonight was different. Tonight, his best friend and business partner Omar had something up his sleeve. "Khalid," Omar's voice boomed over the music. "There you are, my friend, hiding from your own party?" Khalid turned, a smirk playing on his lips. "Observing, Omar? Always observing." Omar chuckled, clapping Khalid on the back. "Always the strategist. But tell me, what's left to conquer? You have it all, money, power, women. What challenge remains for the great Khalid al-Rashid?" There was a glint in Omar's eye that Khalid knew all too well. It was the look of a man with a proposition, and if there was one thing Khalid couldn't resist, it was a challenge. "You have something in mind," Khalid said, raising an eyebrow. Omar's grin widened. "Perhaps. But first let me ask you a question. In all your conquests, in all your victories, have you ever truly been tested? Have you ever faced a challenge that made you question yourself?" Khalid scoffed. "There isn't a challenge I can't overcome, Omar. You know this. Is that so?" Omar leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then how about this? Marry a woman who is your complete opposite, someone who doesn't fit your ideal of beauty or sophistication. Stay married for 6 months, truly married, living together, appearing in public. If you can do that, I'll give you $1 million. For a moment, Khalid was speechless, then he burst out laughing. "I can't be serious." "Oh, but I am," Omar replied, his expression now deadly serious. "Think about it, Khalid. You've built your empire on your ability to charm, to manipulate, to always be in control. But can you maintain that control when faced with someone who challenges everything you stand for?" Khalid's mind raced. The money meant nothing to him. He could lose $1 million and not even notice. But the challenge, the idea of proving once again that he could bend any situation to his will, that was intoxicating. "And who would this woman be?" Khalid asked. His curiosity piqued. Omar smiled. "Leave that to me, Eve. I'll find someone suitable, or should I say unsuitable." Khalid drained his whiskey, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat. "You're on, Omar. 6 months, and I'll prove to you that there's no one I can't charm, no situation I can't master." As they shook hands, sealing the bet, neither man noticed the woman watching them from across the room. Sarah Thompson, an American journalist covering the party for a local expat magazine, had overheard every word. Her full figure was squeezed into a dress that was a size too small, her curly hair refusing to be tamed in the humid Dubai air. She was everything Khalid typically overlooked, plump, plain by his standards, and fiercely independent. Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities. She had come to Dubai chasing a story, and now it seemed the story had found her. Little did Khalid know, but Sarah had her own reasons for being interested in him, reasons that went far beyond a simple journalistic scoop. As the party continued around her, Sarah made her way to the bar, her heart pounding. She ordered a drink, her mind already formulating a plan. If Omar was looking for a woman to challenge Khalid, she would make sure she was at the top of that list. The next morning, Khalid awoke to a pounding headache and a message from Omar. "I've found her," it read. "Meet me at the Burj Al Arab for lunch. Your future wife awaits." Khalid groaned, the reality of his impulsive bet hitting him like a freight train. But he was a man of his word, and more importantly, a man who never backed down from a challenge. He showered, dressed in one of his impeccably tailored suits, and headed out to meet his fate. The Burj Al Arab, with its iconic sail-shaped silhouette, loomed before him as his chauffeur pulled up to the entrance. Khalid strode through the opulent lobby, turning heads as always. He found Omar waiting for him in the Al Muntaha restaurant, with its breathtaking views of the Persian Gulf. "So, "Where is this paragon of unsuitability?" Khalid asked as he sat down, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Omar grinned. "Patience, my friend. She'll be here soon, but first let me lay out the ground rules. You will marry her within the week. You will live together, attend events together, and to all appearances be a happily married couple. No cheating, no separate accommodations. For 6 months, she is your wife in every sense of the word, except the physical. That's up to you two to navigate." Khalid listened, his face a mask of cool indifference. Inside, however, a small seed of doubt began to take root. What had he gotten himself into? Just then the maitre d' approached their table. "Mr. Al-Rashid, there's a Miss Thompson here to see you." Khalid turned, expecting to see some frumpy, middle-aged woman. Instead, his eyes fell on Sarah. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by his standards, true, but there was something in her eyes, a fire, a challenge, that caught him off guard. "Mr. Al-Rashid," Sarah said, her voice cool and professional. "I understand you're in need of a wife." Khalid's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. He turned to Omar. "Is this some kind of joke?" Omar shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You said you could charm anyone, overcome any challenge. Well, here's your challenge, Khalid. Meet Sarah Thompson, your future wife." As Sarah took a seat at their table, Khalid felt a strange mix of emotions: irritation at Omar's cunning, curiosity about this bold American woman, and beneath it all, a spark of excitement. This, he realized, might be the most interesting 6 months of his life. Little did he know Sarah had plans of her own, plans that would shake the very foundations of his carefully constructed world. As she smiled at him across the table, her eyes held secrets that would soon turn Khalid's life upside down. The game was on, and the stakes were higher than Khalid could possibly imagine. The week following Khalid's impulsive bet passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Despite his initial shock, Khalid approached the situation with his characteristic confidence and charm. He was determined to turn this unexpected challenge into yet another victory, another testament to his unshakable control over his life and those around him. Sarah, on the other hand, maintained a cool demeanor that both intrigued and frustrated Khalid. She agreed to the hasty wedding arrangements with an almost unsettling ease, as if marrying a millionaire she barely knew was an everyday occurrence. Her apparent indifference to his wealth and status only served to pique Khalid's curiosity further. The wedding itself was a small private affair, a stark contrast to the lavish celebrations Khalid typically hosted. In a modest ceremony at the Dubai marriage court, Khalid and Sarah exchanged vows, their words echoing hollowly in the sparsely decorated room. As he slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, Khalid couldn't help but notice the slight tremor in her hand, the only crack in her otherwise impenetrable facade. "With this ring I thee wed," Khalid said, his voice steady and confident. He looked into Sarah's eyes, expecting to see awe, gratitude, or at least a hint of the nervousness she had momentarily displayed. Instead, he found himself staring into a pair of hazel eyes that seemed to challenge him, to dare him to look deeper. "I accept this ring," Sarah replied, her voice clear and unwavering, "and all that it represents." There was something in the way she emphasized all that sent a shiver down Khalid's spine. For a brief moment, he wondered if he had underestimated this woman. As they exited the court, now legally man and wife, they were greeted by a small group of paparazzi. News of Khalid al-Rashid's surprise marriage had spread quickly, and the Dubai social scene was abuzz with speculation. Khalid instinctively reached for Sarah's hand, ready to present a united front to the flashing cameras. To his surprise, Sarah pulled away. "I think we can skip the lovey-dovey act for now, don't you?" she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "After all, we both know what this is." Khalid's jaw tightened, but he managed to maintain his smile for the cameras. This was not going according to plan. He was used to women fawning over him, not rejecting his touch in public. The drive to Khalid's penthouse was silent, the air between them thick with unspoken thoughts and hidden agendas. As they entered the opulent living room, with its panoramic views of the Dubai skyline, Khalid finally broke the silence. "So, Mrs. Al-Rashid," he said, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from his voice, "welcome to your new home. I hope it meets your standards." Sarah walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her eyes taking in the glittering cityscape below. "It's certainly impressive," she said, turning back to face him. But then again, I've never been one to be impressed by material things. Khalid raised an eyebrow. No? Then what does impress you, Sarah? Integrity, she replied without hesitation. Kindness, the ability to see beyond oneself and make a positive impact on the world. She paused, her eyes boring into his. Things that, from what I've heard, are in short supply in your world, Mr. Al-Rashid. Khalid felt a flicker of anger at her words, but he quickly suppressed it. He was not about to let this woman get under his skin. You seem to have formed quite an opinion of me already, he said, his tone deceptively light. May I ask what sources you've been consulting? Sarah shrugged. Let's just say I've done my research. It's what any good journalist would do. Ah yes, the journalist, Khalid said, moving to pour himself a drink. Tell me, is this all just a story to you? A chance to get an inside scoop on the life of Khalid al-Rashid? Would it bother you if it was? Sarah countered, crossing her arms. Khalid turned to face her, drink in hand. Not at all. In fact, I welcome the publicity. But I wonder, Sarah, if you've considered what you're getting yourself into. This isn't just a story. This is real life. My life. And for the next 6 months, it's your life too. Sarah's expression softened slightly, and for a moment Khalid thought he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that now familiar look of determination. I'm well aware of what I've signed up for, Khalid, she said. The question is, are you? Before Khalid could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Omar. Hope the honeymoon is going well. Don't forget you have the charity gala tomorrow night. Time to show off the new Mrs. Al-Rashid to society. Khalid looked up from his phone to find Sarah watching him expectantly. It seems we have our first public appearance tomorrow, he said. A charity gala. I trust you brought something suitable to wear. Sarah's lips curved into a small smile. Oh, I'm sure I can find something in my suitcase that will do. Don't worry. I won't embarrass you in front of your high society friends. There was something in her tone that made Khalid uneasy. He had the distinct feeling that Sarah had her own plans for tomorrow night, plans that might not align with his desire for a smooth, uneventful evening. As they retired to separate bedrooms that night, Khalid insisting that Sarah take the master suite while he moved to one of the guest rooms, both of them lay awake, minds racing with thoughts of what the coming months would bring. Khalid found himself both frustrated and intrigued by his new wife. She was unlike any woman he had ever encountered, seemingly immune to his charm and unimpressed by his wealth. He was determined to crack her code, to find a way to bring her under his influence, like everyone else in his life. Sarah, for her part, stared at the ceiling of her luxurious new bedroom, her heart heavy with the weight of her secret mission. She thought of her father, of the life they had lost because of men like Khalid. Tomorrow night would be her first real test, her first opportunity to start unraveling the carefully constructed image of Khalid al-Rashid. As the Dubai night pulsed with life outside their windows, both Khalid and Sarah drifted into uneasy sleep, each dreaming of victory in this strange game they had entered. But as the saying goes, in love and war there are no true winners, only survivors. And the battle between Khalid and Sarah was only just beginning. The charity gala was in full swing, the grand ballroom of the Atlantis, the Palm, transformed into a glittering sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Khalid stood at the entrance, a forced smile plastered on his face as he greeted Dubai's elite. He was the picture of suave sophistication in his custom Tom Ford suit, but his eyes kept darting to the grand staircase, anxiety building with each passing minute. Where was Sarah? They had agreed to arrive separately, a concession Khalid had made in a moment of weakness, swayed by Sarah's argument that it would create more buzz. Now, as he stood alone, fielding questions about his mysterious new bride, he was beginning to regret that decision. Just as Khalid was considering sending someone to check on her, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the top of the staircase, where Sarah stood, a vision that took even Khalid's breath away. She wore a stunning emerald green gown that hugged her curves, accentuating her full figure in a way that was both elegant and daring. Her usually unruly hair was swept up in an intricate updo, tendrils framing her face softly. But it was her eyes that captured everyone's attention, fierce, determined, and lined with coal that made them seem to smolder. As Sarah descended the stairs, Khalid moved to meet her, his heart pounding in a way he wasn't accustomed to. "You look unexpected," he murmured, offering his arm. Sarah's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll take that as a compliment," she replied, placing her hand on his arm. "Shall we mingle, husband?" The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions and small talk. To Khalid's surprise, Sarah played the role of devoted wife perfectly, laughing at the right moments, asking insightful questions about various business ventures, and generally charming everyone she met. He found himself watching her with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. "Khalid, darling?" A shrill voice cut through the crowd, and Khalid turned to see Amira, one of Dubai's most notorious socialites, approaching. "You've been holding out on us. Where have you been hiding this delightful creature?" Before Khalid could respond, Sarah stepped forward, extending her hand. "Sarah Al-Rashid," she introduced herself, her voice warm but with an undercurrent of steel. "I'm afraid I've been rather busy with my work. I'm a journalist, you see." Amira's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. "A journalist? How interesting. And what sort of stories do you cover, my dear?" "Oh, all sorts," Sarah replied airily. "But lately I've been particularly interested in corporate ethics. It's fascinating how some of the world's wealthiest individuals and companies navigate the murky waters of international business law." Khalid felt a chill run down his spine. He placed a hand on Sarah's lower back, a gesture that looked affectionate to observers but was meant as a warning. "I'm sure Amira doesn't want to discuss business at a party, darling," he said smoothly. But Sarah wasn't finished. "Actually, Amira, I'd love to get your perspective. As someone who moves in these circles, what are your thoughts on the recent trend of corporate transparency? Do you think it's making a difference, or is it just window dressing?" Amira looked flustered, her eyes darting between Sarah and Khalid. Well, I'm not really qualified to comment on such matters. If you'll excuse me, I see an old friend I simply must greet." As Amira hurried away, Khalid tightened his grip on Sarah's waist, steering her towards a quiet corner of the ballroom. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. "My job," she replied. "Isn't that what you wanted? A wife who could hold her own in your world?" "I wanted discretion," Khalid snapped. "Not someone who's going to alienate half of my business associates with probing questions about corporate ethics." A flicker of something. Regret? Defiance? Passed across Sarah's face. "I'm sorry if I've embarrassed you," she said, though her tone suggested she was anything but sorry. "Perhaps I should leave early. I'm sure you can make my excuses." Khalid was about to agree when he caught sight of Omar watching them from across the room, a knowing smirk on his face. He realized that letting Sarah leave would be admitting defeat, and that was something Khalid Al-Rashid never did. "No," he said, forcing a smile. "We came together. We'll leave together. But perhaps we could take a turn around the gardens first. I think we both could use some fresh air." Sarah nodded, allowing Khalid to lead her out onto the terrace. The night air was cool and fragrant with the scent of jasmine, a stark contrast to the perfumed stuffiness of the ballroom. They walked in silence for a few moments, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Khalid spoke. "You're not what I expected, Sarah." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "And what did you expect? A docile trophy wife who would hang on your every word and be grateful for the crumbs of attention you deigned to give her?" Khalid stopped walking, turning to face her. "I expected someone who understood the game we're playing. Someone who wouldn't jeopardize everything I've built on some misguided crusade for journalistic integrity." Sarah's eyes flashed. "And I expected someone who might actually care about the consequences of his actions. Someone who might see this as an opportunity for growth rather than just another challenge to be conquered." They stood there, staring at each other, the air crackling with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. For a moment, Khalid saw past Sarah's defenses, glimpsing a vulnerability that made his heart constrict in an unfamiliar way. But then the moment passed, and Sarah's walls were back up. "We should return to the party," she said, her voice cool and controlled once more. "I'm sure your adoring public is missing you." As they made their way back to the ballroom, Khalid found himself more confused than ever. This woman, this infuriating, intriguing woman, was nothing like he had anticipated. She challenged him, pushed him, made him question things he had long taken for granted. And as much as he hated to admit it, a part of him was starting to enjoy it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and stilted conversation. By the time they finally left, Both Khalid and Sarah were exhausted, emotionally and physically. In the back of the limousine, Sarah kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Well, that was certainly an eventful evening," she murmured, more to herself than to Khalid. Khalid watched her, his mind racing. He had entered into this arrangement thinking it would be a simple game, a challenge to be overcome. But now, looking at the complex, passionate woman beside him, he realized that nothing about this situation was simple. As the limo wound its way through the glittering Dubai night, Khalid found himself wondering, not for the first time, what he had gotten himself into. And more importantly, how he was going to emerge from these 6 months with his heart and his empire intact. The weeks following the charity gala were a delicate dance of tension and tentative understanding between Khalid and Sarah. They settled into a routine of sorts, sharing breakfast in silence before Khalid left for work, and reconvening in the evening for dinner, where conversation was stilted but civil. It was during one of these dinners that Khalid decided to broach the subject that had been nagging at him since the gala. "Sarah," he began, setting down his fork, "I think it's time we discussed your journalistic interests." Sarah looked up, her expression guarded. "What about them?" "I understand that you have a job to do," Khalid said carefully, "but I need to know that you're not going to use our arrangement to dig up dirt on me or my associates." For a moment, Sarah was silent, studying Khalid's face. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. "Oh, Khalid," she said, shaking her head. "If you think I need to be married to you to dig up dirt, you greatly underestimate my investigative skills." Khalid felt a flicker of unease. "What do you mean?" Sarah's eyes met his, challenging and direct. "I mean that I've been investigating you and your business practices long before this marriage of convenience. The question you should be asking isn't what I might find out. It's why I agreed to this arrangement in the first place." The implication of her words hit Khalid like a physical blow. He pushed back from the table, his mind racing. "You're telling me you had an agenda all along? That this isn't just about the story or the challenge?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Everyone has an agenda, Khalid. I thought you, of all people, would understand that." For the first time in years, Khalid felt truly off balance. He had been so focused on maintaining control, on winning this game, that he had failed to see the bigger picture. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low and intense. Sarah took a deep breath as if steeling herself. "I want justice," she said simply. "For my father. For all the people whose lives have been destroyed by corporate greed and unchecked ambition." Khalid's brow furrowed. "Your father? What does he have to do with this?" And so, Sarah began to tell her story. She spoke of her father, a small business owner who had been driven to financial ruin by a series of aggressive corporate takeovers. Takeovers orchestrated by none other than Khalid's company. She told him of the toll it had taken on her family, of the dreams that had been shattered, of the lives forever altered. As Khalid listened, he felt a strange mix of emotions: defensiveness, guilt, and an unexpected empathy for the woman sitting across from him. He had always viewed his business dealings as just that: business. Impersonal, driven by profit and growth. But hearing Sarah's story, seeing the pain in her eyes, he began to understand the human cost of his actions in a way he never had before. "I'm sorry," he said when she finished, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "I had no idea." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Of course you didn't. Men like you never do. You're too insulated by your wealth and power to see the consequences of your actions." Khalid bristled at her words, his natural instinct to defend himself rising to the surface. But something stopped him, perhaps the raw honesty in Sarah's voice, or the realization that for once in his life he might be in the wrong. "So what now?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Are you going to expose me? Ruin me the way you feel I ruined your father?" Sarah shook her head. "No, Khalid, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I believe people can change, given the right motivation. I want you to see, really see, the impact of your actions. And maybe, just maybe, use your power and influence for good." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Khalid found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about Sarah, about himself, about the world he had built around him. "I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah reached across the table, surprising both of them by taking his hand. "I'm not asking you to be someone else, Khalid. I'm asking you to be the best version of yourself, To use your intelligence, your drive, your ambition for something more than just accumulating wealth and power. As Khalid looked into Sarah's eyes, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. Hope. Hope for him, for what he could become. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt a stirring of something in his chest. A desire to be worthy of that hope. "I can't promise anything," he said slowly, "but I'm willing to try." Sarah's smile was small but genuine. "That's all I ask." As they cleared the dinner table together, a newfound understanding between them, Khalid realized that this arrangement had become something far more complex and meaningful than he ever could have anticipated. He had entered into it thinking he would be teaching Sarah about his world. Instead, she was opening his eyes to a whole new perspective. That night, as Khalid lay in bed, unable to sleep, he found himself thinking about the future. Not just the next business deal or the next party, but the kind of legacy he wanted to leave, the kind of man he wanted to be. And for the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that Sarah, this maddening, inspiring woman, might be the key to unlocking a part of himself he never knew existed. Little did he know, Sarah was lying awake in her own room, grappling with her own conflicting emotions. She had come into this arrangement with a clear purpose, a mission of justice and exposure. But now, seeing glimpses of the man Khalid could be, she found her resolve wavering. As the Dubai night hummed outside their windows, both Khalid and Sarah drifted off to sleep, their minds full of possibilities and their hearts heavy with the weight of uncharted territory. The game they had entered into was changing, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. And the stakes, they both realized, were higher than ever before. The weeks following Khalid and Sarah's revelatory conversation brought subtle but significant changes to their dynamic. Khalid, true to his word, began to take a more active interest in the ethical implications of his business dealings. He found himself poring over reports late into the night, not just looking at profit margins, but at the human impact of his decisions. Sarah, for her part, began to see glimpses of the man Khalid could be, compassionate, thoughtful, and driven by more than just the bottom line. She watched with a mixture of surprise and admiration as he initiated a review of his company's labor practices, personally visiting some of the construction sites where his lowest-paid workers toiled. One particularly sweltering afternoon, Khalid returned from such a visit, his usually impeccable suit rumpled and stained with sweat. Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she had been working on an article, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "Rough day at the office?" she quipped, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. Khalid collapsed onto the sofa beside her, loosening his tie. "You have no idea," he sighed. "I've been talking to the workers, Sarah. Really talking to them. And I'm ashamed of what I've seen." Sarah set aside her work, turning to face him fully. "Tell me," she said softly. And so Khalid did. He spoke of the cramped living conditions, the long hours, the inadequate safety measures. As he talked, Sarah saw the genuine distress in his eyes, the way his hands clenched and unclenched as he recounted particularly troubling details. "I've always prided myself on running an efficient operation," Khalid said, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. "But efficiency at what cost? These men, they're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They have families, dreams, lives outside of the work they do for me." Sarah reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing her hand on his arm. "The fact that you're seeing this now, that you're willing to acknowledge it, that's important, Khalid." He looked at her, his dark eyes intense. "It's not enough, though, is it? Acknowledgement without action is meaningless." Sarah felt a surge of something she couldn't quite name. Pride, perhaps, or hope. "So what are you going to do about it?" Khalid stood up, pacing the room as he often did when his mind was racing. "I'm going to change things. Overhaul our entire labor system. Better housing, fair wages, proper safety protocols. It'll cost millions, but..." He paused, turning to face Sarah. "It's the right thing to do." For a moment, Sarah was speechless. This was more than she had ever dared to hope for when she entered into this arrangement. "Khalid, that's wonderful. But are you sure? Your shareholders..." "To hell with the shareholders," Khalid interrupted, a fire in his eyes that Sarah had never seen before. "I built this company from nothing. If they don't like the direction I'm taking it, they're welcome to sell their shares." Sarah stood up, moved by his passion. "I want to help," she said. My next article, it could be about this, about the changes you're implementing. It could inspire other companies to follow suit. Khalid's expression softened as he looked at her. You'd do that? Even after everything? Sarah nodded. This is exactly why I became a journalist, to shed light on important issues, to promote positive change. And Khalid, what you're proposing, it's revolutionary in this part of the world. As they stood there, eyes locked, something shifted between them. The air seemed to crackle with an energy that neither of them had anticipated. Khalid took a step closer, his hand reaching out as if to touch Sarah's face. But before he could, the moment was shattered by the shrill ring of his phone. Khalid cursed under his breath, fishing the device out of his pocket. It's Omar, he said, frowning at the screen. Sarah nodded, taking a step back. You should take it. I'll go start dinner. As she retreated to the kitchen, Sarah's mind was whirling. What had just happened? Or almost happened? She had come into this marriage with a clear purpose, a mission. But now, seeing the changes in Khalid, feeling the undeniable pull between them, she found herself questioning everything. In the living room, Khalid was having a heated conversation with Omar. What do you mean pulling out? The deal is nearly finalized. Omar's voice crackled through the speaker. Your little stunt at the construction site has spooked some of our major investors, Khalid. They're worried you're going soft. If you go through with these proposed changes, they're threatening to withdraw their support. Khalid felt a familiar anger rising in him, the old instinct to protect his empire at all costs. But then he thought of the workers he'd met, of their stories and struggles. He thought of Sarah, of the hope and pride in her eyes when he'd shared his plans. Let them withdraw, Khalid said, his voice steady and determined. We'll find new investors, ones who understand that ethical business practices are the way of the future. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Who are you? And what have you done with Khalid al-Rashid? Omar finally said, his tone a mixture of disbelief and, was that respect? Khalid laughed, a genuine free sound that he hadn't heard from himself in years. I'm still me, Omar, just a better version, I hope. As he ended the call, Khalid looked towards the kitchen where he could hear Sarah moving about, humming softly to herself. He realized with a jolt of surprise that for the first time in his adult life, he was truly excited about the future. Not because of potential profits or power plays, but because he felt like he was on the verge of becoming the man he was always meant to be. And as he walked towards the kitchen, drawn by the domestic sounds and the promise of companionship, Khalid acknowledged to himself what he had been trying to deny for weeks. He was falling in love with Sarah Thompson. The question was, in this complex web of hidden agendas and unexpected emotions, did she feel the same? As Khalid's company underwent its radical transformation, Sarah found herself increasingly caught between her journalistic instincts and her growing feelings for the man she had married. She spent her days interviewing workers, documenting the changes in their living conditions and work environments, and her evenings engaged in deep conversations with Khalid about the future of ethical business practices in the Middle East. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sun set over the Dubai skyline, Khalid turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. You know, I've been thinking about what you said when you first told me about your father. Sarah tensed slightly, her grip tightening on her glass of iced tea. Oh? Khalid nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I want to make amends, not just to your family but to all the others who might have suffered because of my past business practices. I'm thinking of setting up a foundation to provide support, education, and opportunities for those affected by corporate takeovers and unethical business dealings. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Khalid, that's incredible. But are you sure? The financial implications are substantial, yes, Khalid finished for her, finally turning to meet her gaze. But so is the potential for positive change. And isn't that what this has all been about? In that moment, looking into Khalid's earnest eyes, Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. This was not the same man she had married months ago, the arrogant, self-centered tycoon she had been determined to expose. This was someone altogether different, someone who made her heart race for entirely unexpected reasons. I think it's a wonderful idea, she said softly, reaching out to place her hand over his. And I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Khalid's smile was warm and genuine as he intertwined his fingers with hers. "I was hoping you'd say that. Your insight and experience would be invaluable." As they sat there, hands joined, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the city's towering skyscrapers, both Khalid and Sarah felt the weight of unspoken words between them. The line between their arrangement and something deeper was blurring more each day, and neither seemed quite sure how to navigate these new, uncharted waters. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Khalid threw himself into the creation of the foundation, working tirelessly to set up its structure and goals. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself juggling her journalistic duties with her growing involvement in Khalid's projects. It was during a late-night planning session for the foundation's launch event that things finally came to a head. They had been working for hours, poring over guest lists and donation strategies, when Khalid suddenly stood up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "This is insane," he said, pacing the room. "A year ago, I wouldn't have even considered something like this, and now it's all I can think about." Sarah watched him, her heart pounding. "People change, Khalid. You've changed." He stopped pacing, turning to face her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Have I? Or have I just finally become the person I was always meant to be?" He took a step closer to her. "And if I have changed, Sarah, it's because of you." Sarah stood up, suddenly feeling vulnerable under his gaze. "Khalid, But before she could finish, Khalid closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "I need to know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Is this still just an arrangement for you? Or do you feel it too?" For a moment, Sarah was frozen, her mind racing. This was everything she had told herself she couldn't have, everything she had convinced herself she didn't want. But looking into Khalid's eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands on her skin, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. "I feel it," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, and the world seemed to fall away. The kiss was everything, passionate, tender, a culmination of months of tension and growing affection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "What does this mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Khalid rested his forehead against hers. "It means I'm in love with you, Sarah Thompson, and I don't care about bets or arrangements or anything else. I just want you, if you'll have me." Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I love you too," she admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. "But Khalid, there's so much we need to talk about, so much history." He silenced her with another gentle kiss. "And we will talk about all of it. But right now, can we just have this moment?" As they stood there in each other's arms, the city twinkling below them, both Khalid and Sarah knew that their lives had irrevocably changed. The game they had entered into had become something real, something profound, and neither was quite sure what the future held. But for now, in the quiet of the night, with the warmth of newfound love surrounding them, the future could wait. They had found something neither had expected, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep, abiding affection. As Sarah nestled her head against Khalid's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she realized that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. And this, she thought, closing her eyes and breathing in the moment, was just the beginning of their real story. The weeks following Khalid and Sarah's confession of love were filled with a newfound joy, but also with the complexities of navigating their relationship in the public eye. The launch of Khalid's foundation was approaching rapidly, and with it came increased scrutiny from the media and business world. One morning, as they sat having breakfast, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her face paled as she read the headline. "Khalid," she said, her voice tight with concern, "you need to see this." She passed him her phone, and Khalid's jaw clenched as he read the article. It was a scathing exposé, questioning the motives behind his recent philanthropic efforts, and suggesting that his marriage to Sarah was nothing more than a publicity stunt to rehabilitate his image. "They're calling it Al-Rashid's redemption tour," Sarah said softly. "They're implying that our relationship isn't real." Khalid set the phone down, his expression a mixture of anger and determination. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "We know the truth." But Sarah wasn't so easily reassured. "Khalid, they're digging into my past too. They've uncovered my initial motivations for agreeing to this marriage. If this gets out, Khalid reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Then we'll face it together. Sarah, I don't care about how or why this started. What matters is what we have now. Sarah squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. You're right, but we need to be prepared. The foundation launch is in 2 days, and you can bet every reporter in Dubai will be there looking for a story. Khalid nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. Then we'll give them a story, but it'll be our story told our way. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparations. Khalid and Sarah worked tirelessly, coordinating with their PR team, rehearsing statements and steeling themselves for the media onslaught to come. On the night of the foundation launch, the ballroom of the Burj Al Arab was a sea of Dubai's elite, journalists and representatives from various charitable organizations. Khalid and Sarah arrived hand in hand, presenting a united front to the flashing cameras and curious onlookers. As Khalid took the stage to deliver his speech, Sarah watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. He spoke passionately about the Foundation's mission, about the importance of ethical business practices, and about the transformative power of second chances. Many of you may be wondering why I've chosen this path, Khalid said, his voice strong and clear. The truth is, I was given a gift, the gift of perspective, and that gift came in the form of my wife, Sarah. A murmur rippled through the crowd as all eyes turned to Sarah. She felt a moment of panic, but Khalid's steady gaze gave her courage. Sarah came into my life under unusual circumstances, it's true, Khalid continued. But what began as an arrangement has become the most genuine and transformative relationship of my life. She challenged me to be better, to do better. And in doing so, she helped me rediscover the values that should have been guiding me all along. As Khalid went on to outline the Foundation's initiatives, Sarah felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Omar standing beside her, a conflicted expression on his face. He's really changed, hasn't he? Omar said quietly. Sarah nodded. We both have. Omar sighed, running a hand through his hair. I owe you both an apology. This bet, it was never supposed to go this far. I never imagined that we'd fall in love. Sarah finished for him, a small smile playing on her lips. Omar chuckled. That and that Khalid would become some kind of corporate Robin Hood. But I have to admit it suits him. As Khalid concluded his speech to thunderous applause, Sarah felt a surge of emotion. This was more than she had ever dared to hope for when she first agreed to this arrangement. She had come seeking justice, maybe even revenge, but instead she had found love, purpose, and a partner in creating real, positive change. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of interviews, handshakes, and heartfelt conversations with beneficiaries of the Foundation. By the time Khalid and Sarah finally made it back to their penthouse, both were exhausted but exhilarated. We did it, Sarah said, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. Khalid pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We're just getting started, he murmured. As they stood there, holding each other in the quiet of their home, both knew that challenges lay ahead. There would be skeptics to convince, old wounds to heal, and a lifetime of work to do in reshaping the business world. But in that moment, with the city lights twinkling beyond their windows and the warmth of each other's embrace, Khalid and Sarah felt ready to face whatever came their way. They had found in each other not just love, but a shared purpose, a commitment to making the world a little bit better, one ethical decision at a time. As Sarah looked up into Khalid's eyes, she saw not the arrogant tycoon she had first met, but a man of depth, compassion, and unwavering determination. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her heart, that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. So, Khalid said, a mischievous glint in his eye, what's our next move, partner? Sarah grinned, feeling a thrill of excitement at the possibilities that lay before them. Well, she said, I have a few ideas. And as they began to plan their next steps, bouncing ideas off each other with the easy rhythm they had developed, both Khalid and Sarah knew that together they were capable of changing not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. It was a responsibility they embraced wholeheartedly, fueled by their love for each other and their shared vision for a better world. The months following the Foundation launch were a whirlwind of activity for Khalid and Sarah. Their love had deepened, strengthened by the challenges they faced together and the shared vision they were bringing to life. The Al Rashid Foundation was making waves in the business world. setting new standards for corporate responsibility and ethical practices. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in Khalid's office reviewing proposals for the foundation's next project, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. Her eyes widened as she read the email. "Khalid," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement, "you won't believe this. The International Business Ethics Association wants us to be keynote speakers at their annual conference in New York." Khalid looked up from his laptop, a proud smile spreading across his face. "That's incredible, Sarah. Your work is getting the recognition it deserves." Sarah shook her head, her eyes shining. "Not just my work, our work. They want both of us to speak about the transformation of Al Rashid Industries and the impact of the foundation." Khalid stood up and walked around the desk, pulling Sarah into a warm embrace. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he murmured into her hair. Sarah nodded, thinking back to the tumultuous beginnings of their relationship. From a marriage of convenience to partners in every sense of the word. Who would have thought? As they began preparations for the conference, Khalid and Sarah found themselves reflecting on their journey. The initial mistrust and hidden agendas had given way to a deep, abiding love and a shared commitment to making a difference in the world. The night before they were due to leave for New York, Khalid surprised Sarah with a candle-lit dinner on their penthouse balcony. As they enjoyed the meal overlooking the glittering Dubai skyline, Khalid reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "Sarah," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've changed me in ways I never thought possible, made me a better man, a better leader." Sarah felt her heart racing, sensing the weight of the moment. "Khalid, what are you saying?" Khalid stood up, gently pulling Sarah to her feet. Then, to her utter amazement, he dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sarah Thompson," he said, his eyes shining with love and determination. "Our story may have begun as an arrangement, but it's become the greatest love I've ever known. Will you marry me? For real this time, no contracts, no time limits. Just us, building a life and a legacy together." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked down at the man before her. A man so different from the one she had first met, yet fundamentally the same in all the ways that mattered. She saw in his eyes the same passion for justice that had driven her all these years, the same determination to make the world a better place. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Khalid, I'll marry you." As Khalid slipped the ring onto her finger, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, a nod to the dress she had worn the night they first truly connected, Sarah felt a sense of coming full circle. What had begun as a quest for justice had transformed into something far more profound and lasting. The next morning, as they boarded the private jet to New York, Sarah couldn't stop glancing at her ring, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. Khalid, noticing her distraction, squeezed her hand. "Ready to change the world, Mrs. Al-Rashid?" he asked with a playful smile. Sarah grinned back, feeling a thrill of excitement at the adventures that lay ahead. "Always, Mr. Al-Rashid, as long as we're doing it together." As the plane took off, carrying them towards new horizons, both Khalid and Sarah felt a sense of purpose and possibility. They had each other, they had their love, and they had a shared vision for a more ethical, compassionate business world. The conference in New York was just the beginning. They had plans to expand the foundation's reach globally, to challenge outdated business practices, and to inspire a new generation of leaders to prioritize people over profits. As they soared over the ocean, leaving behind the glittering towers of Dubai and heading towards the promise of new challenges and opportunities, Khalid and Sarah knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Their love story, unconventional as it had been, was proof that sometimes the most unexpected partnerships could lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And as they leaned into each other, fingers intertwined, both silently vowed to never lose sight of the values that had brought them together: integrity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that one person, or in their case, two people united in love and purpose, could indeed change the world. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility, and Khalid and Sarah were ready to face it head-on, hand in hand, heart to heart. Their journey from a marriage of convenience to a union of true love and shared purpose was just the first chapter in a story that promised to inspire generations to come. 5 years had passed since Khalid and Sarah's fateful trip to New York. The International Business Ethics Conference had been just the beginning of their global journey to reshape the corporate world. Now, on a warm Dubai evening, they stood hand in hand on the balcony of their penthouse, overlooking a city that had changed almost as much as they had. Sarah, her hand resting gently on her swollen belly, smiled as she felt a kick from their unborn child. "I think this little one is going to be just as driven as her parents," she laughed, turning to Khalid. Khalid's eyes softened as he placed his hand next to hers. "Well, she'll certainly have big shoes to fill." The Sarah Al-Rashid Foundation for Investigative Journalism is making waves all over the world. Sarah beamed with pride. The foundation, established 2 years ago, was her brainchild, a way to support ethical journalism and expose corporate wrongdoing globally. It was the perfect complement to the Al-Rashid Foundation, which continued to set new standards for corporate responsibility under Khalid's guidance. "And don't forget about the ethics in business curriculum we've developed," Sarah added. "It's being taught in business schools across 5 continents now." Khalid nodded, his expression turning reflective. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how far we've come. From that impulsive bet to this." He gestured at the city below them, where the effects of their work were visible in the improved living conditions of workers, the rise of ethical business practices, and the flourishing of local communities. Sarah leaned into him, remembering the journey that had brought them here. The challenges they'd faced, the skeptics they'd proved wrong, the lives they'd changed, including their own. "We've done good, haven't we?" she murmured. "We have," Khalid agreed, "but our work is far from over." Just then, the door to the balcony burst open, and a whirlwind of energy in the form of their 3-year-old son Zain rushed out. "Mama! Baba! Look what I drew!" Sarah and Khalid turned, smiling at their son's enthusiasm. Zain held up a colorful drawing, filled with stick figures and what looked like buildings. "It's beautiful, Habibi," Sarah said, kneeling down despite her pregnant belly to get a better look. "What is it?" "It's us," Zain declared proudly. "You and Baba and me and the new baby. And all the people we're helping." Khalid felt a lump form in his throat as he looked at the drawing. In Zain's innocent scribbles, he saw the legacy they were building, the values they were passing on to the next generation. "That's right, son," Khalid said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's exactly what we're doing." As the small family huddled together on the balcony, the sun setting behind them, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Sarah and Khalid exchanged a look of deep understanding and love. They had started this journey as reluctant partners in a marriage of convenience. Now they stood united, partners in love, in business, in parenting, and in their shared mission to make the world a better place. The bet that Omar had proposed all those years ago was long forgotten. In its place was something far more valuable, a love story that had not only transformed their lives, but had rippled out to touch countless others. As night fell over Dubai, the Al-Rashid family made their way inside, Zain chattering excitedly about his drawing and the baby kicking as if in agreement. Sarah and Khalid listened to their son, offering encouragement and praise, their free hands intertwined. They knew that challenges lay ahead. The work of changing the world was never done. But they also knew that together there was nothing they couldn't face. From a marriage of convenience had blossomed a partnership of purpose, a love that transcended cultural boundaries, and a shared vision that was reshaping the very fabric of global business. As they tucked Zain into bed that night, Sarah and Khalid realized that their greatest creation wasn't the foundations they'd built or the policies they'd changed. It was the family they'd formed and the example they were setting, showing the world that love, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right could truly change everything. And as they retired to their own room, exhausted but deeply content, Khalid pulled Sarah close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" Sarah asked, looking up at him. "For taking a chance on me, for showing me a better way, for loving me," Khalid replied. Sarah smiled, stretching up to kiss him softly. "Thank you for the same," she murmured against his lips. As they drifted off to sleep, the city humming gently beyond their windows, both Khalid and Sarah knew that this was more than they could have ever dreamed of when they first entered into their arrangement. It was a love story, yes, but it was also a story of redemption, of transformation and of the power of two people committed to making a difference. Their journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, their love for each other and their shared passion for justice lighting the way forward.